Tony Faehse, welcome to Australian Musician.
Thank you very much, Greg. Thanks for having me.
So how have you been handling 2020? What effect has it had on you?
Yeah, where do we start? Annus Horribilis, I think it is. Yeah, it's been some year, that's for sure. So many downsides. I don't know what's worse, cancelling overseas travel, cancelling interstate travel, or cancelling travel to another suburb. It's all a bit much, but it's had unexpected upsides as well.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get into that because you've been very busy, but let's go back a little way before we start. You're in Jojo Zep and the Falcons at their peak.
Yes.
A band I saw many times at venues like Bombay Rock. And I have to say that the band was really one of the world's greatest live acts at the time. As a musician, how did it feel to be playing in that band?
Wow. Yes, it's incredible, isn't it? Your life kind of unfolds as it happens, doesn't it, in real time, and you sort of I guess you take things for granted as being sort of the way it should be and the way it is sort of ordained almost at the time, and then when you get sort of later on, it's sort of, you look back and it's history, and it's quite an extraordinary bit of history as well. And yes, it turns out to have been kind of a bit of an apex in many ways, for me personally, and as a musician, and in the history of Australian music. So I guess, yeah, look, I'd had many ups and downs in my career up to that time even, but there had been a kind of a steady trajectory, and it seemed kind of only natural that I should be in such a good band and enjoy myself so much, which we did. Like with all things, it's being in a band is very much like a family affair, and it has all of the drama and the conflict, I suppose, that you get with that. But it was a very happy band, though, despite the normal family sort of frictions that go on.
Yeah. Last year you reunited to honour fellow band member John Power. How was that experience?
Well, that was a fantastic experience, but in very sad circumstances, of course. Yeah. And that's the first of the brothers in arms to fall, which is another measure of time, of course. So this thing I'm talking about with the trajectory that time has, and it's kind of, it marks the end of an era, that's for sure, because there's, no matter what happens, we can never go back to the original lineup again.
Yeah,
it was quite tragic. But the event itself was a great celebration of his life, and a great gig as a gig, and a fitting tribute, I think, to his memory.
Yeah. Another stop along your journey was being in the band with Alvin Stardust. Back in the day.
Very good. Yes.
How did that come about?
Yeah, that's jumping to the chase, absolutely. And it's once again, it's interesting how these things take on a different importance later on in your life. That was sort of part of this trajectory I was talking about with my career, which is a funny word to use about being a rock musician. Career, I don't know, but anyway, whatever it was. And at the time when I was playing with Alvin, it was I was happy to do it, and but I thought of it as a sort of a stepping stone to sort of better things. But as it turns out to have been sort of a highlight and a fascinating sort of period to look back on. And it came about because I started playing in Adelaide, where I come from, in groups back in the 60s as a teenager, and by the early 70s, when I was in my very early 20s, the Australian music scene in the early 70s, it was happening, but it was small. And London was the place to be. That's where the action was. There was lots of things happening in America too, but because of the kind of the British invasion, or the whole sort of Mersey sound and all that sort of thing that we grew up with, we always thought of London as being the epicenter of the rock world. And so my wife and I, we got married specifically so we could travel in the same cabin on an Italian ocean liner to go to Europe back in 1973, which is another great thing, as it turns out, because it was practically the last sort of ocean liner that you could catch to Europe in those days for sort of a reasonable price before the price of oil went up and the whole situation changed. So my life seems to be full of fantastic opportunities that we didn't realise was probably the last chance you had of doing these things until afterwards. But that was another great experience. And in London there was work. There was work for rock musicians, and to be a rock musician was a perfectly valid career. Use that career word again. It was a perfectly valid way to make a living, whereas back in Australia in those days, if you said that you wanted to be a rock guitarist as a living, well, that was just, they'd sort of say, well, that's great to do on the weekends, but, what are you going to do when you grow up, that kind of thing. So, but in England, it was, and in the UK, it was perfectly valid and a large industry and a great thriving scene, even though the economy of the country was actually having a few problems at that time. But there was work, and there was work advertised in the Melody Maker in wanted ads. When the Alvin Stardust one came up, it was just an ad. The ad read something like rock star with #1 record forming band for touring or something, and they wanted, I think, 2 guitarists and a drummer or something like that. And so I went for it and went along, and it turned out to be Alvin Stardust, who had a #1 record with Michael Choo, but he was an invented character, an invented person, and with his image and all that thing that he did, and he had been. It got to #1 from being played on Radio Luxembourg, the pirate radio stations, and a couple of appearances on Top of the Pops. And so he had a #1 record, and he was this rock star, but he had no band and had never done a gig as Alvin Stardust. He'd been a previous person before that. But so I went along for the audition, and along with hundreds of others, I'm sure. But anyway, I got the gig, and I found myself starting off on, I think it was a 48-date summer tour. Arthur Hales was the tour operator in those days, of all over Great Britain, I guess it was, or all over England anyway. And we ended up going to Europe, and we had glam rock outfits, sort of black satin little jackets and those incredible high heel boots that we wore in those days. And like I was saying, it was a glam rock thing. And but we did TV, and we did a lot of work, and it was as I say, it was just a backing band, but it was first division. It was in the mainstream, and it was extremely exciting for somebody in their early 20s. I mean, it's the first time I'd ever been around England and never been to Europe and all the rest of it, and it was fantastic fun. He was going to come to Australia. I think he might have even come out to Australia by himself, and he was going to take the band, but that fell through, which is a shame, because that would have been a fantastic experience again. So yeah, that was my Alvin Stardust thing. It didn't last very long. He had a #1, and then My Jealous Mind, I think, was #3 or 4, and then it was like, I don't know, #15, and then #27, And within a year, he started to do cabaret up north in working men's clubs, like for a whole week in I don't know, these extraordinary places and in the Midlands, and you'd be sort of top of bill, sort of after the ventriloquist and the juggler, that sort of thing. So suddenly it stopped being a sort of a glamorous rock gig and playing at the Rainbow and places like that, and turned into this other thing altogether. So I hadn't been picked out of the chorus line as I'd hoped to be by then from that gig. So I had to go back to looking at the melody maker again.
Yeah. So who were the guitarists that were influencing you along the way?
Well, all the big ones, I guess, as in, and they turned out to be mostly English. I tended to get we did have some in Adelaide, especially. We did have some access to the original sort of Black American Delta guitarists and blues guitarists and things like that. Muddy Waters or slightly differently, B.B. King and those sorts of people. But I was exposed to most of it through English guitarists, most notably Eric Clapton. I guess Jeff Beck probably as much as anyone. I would say Jeff Beck would be one of my biggest influences. I didn't follow him quite so much into the sort of fusion thing that he got into later, but from the Yardbirds and that sort of era, and his first couple of solo albums, Jeff Beck and Peter Green, I guess, and of course also from Led Zeppelin. I just can't think of his name at the moment.
Jimmy Page.
Jimmy Page, of course. Yeah, so kind of the big four, I think you'd say. That's probably who I listened to the most in my formative period.
Yeah. In more recent times, you've been releasing instrumental albums. Yes. And this year you've released one called Flow. Had you been working on that album for a while, or was it a COVID project?
That's very good. Well, yes, my career kind of, I ended up sort of, more or less just thinking about what I wanted to do myself with recording, rather than in a band context, which had been my life up until sort of around about 2000, I suppose. And so I started, mostly instrumental, but I did have some vocal tracks on my earlier solo albums. I'd used some talent. I mean, I started off with mostly instrumental and then just with a tiny bit of vocals, but I would use other players to record with, and I gradually started to get a little, because I've had, this Flow is my 6th album, and the middle 4, I suppose, I would typically have about 3 or 4, maybe even 5 songs of them, they would actually all start out as instrumentals. They were written as instrumentals, and then some I thought would make a good song and would write lyrics for it and get someone to sing it. Not myself. I did sing one song on one track just to sort of keep the hand in, but and that was a good mix for me. But and I had some success, especially with licensing, which was a great thing, because you do need some commercial reason to be doing this stuff, as well as sort of the love of doing it. So that was great, but the licensing kind of got turned off a few years ago, and I kind of, after having been putting out an album every 2 or 3 years, I just kind of lost the drive to finish off and release an album. I kept writing and I kept recording, because that's what I love to do. But to actually get the talent in to play the parts that I'd done virtually and put real drums on things and real strings and horns and all that sort of stuff. But I lost the sort of the necessary will, I guess, to sort of actually finish one off. And even though had all this material, and I kept thinking, well, I must, obviously I've got to put out another album. And anyway, 8 years went by since my last one, Fancy That, in 2012. And then in 2020, somehow or another, there was this COVID thing, and I thought this is the opportunity to get this thing finished and done.
Despite coming out in 2020, the album has a very optimistic feel to it. Was that a conscious thing?
Oh, that's a great question. It wasn't conscious per se, but I do. I mean, it's the way I write and create music is instinctive and organic, really. A musical idea starts, I don't know quite how, and I kind of follow that idea along and see what happens with it, really. And if the fact that it's turned out sounding optimistic sort of suits my relationship with music, I guess you could say. Although I also really like the poignancy and well, sadness really, and the tragedy that you can express in music as well. But yeah, and the feelings that you can express yourself with in music is I guess that's why one does it in many ways. In fact, completely. And I hadn't thought of it as being particularly optimistic, but I do like major seventh chords and upbeat beat, and I like grooves, and I do like uplifting melodies too, and yeah, uplifting as well as upbeat.
Yeah. Tell me about the guitars that you used on the album.
Very good. Yes, because there are a lot of them, although not that many different guitars. Like I started playing, when I first learned to play guitar, I played nylon string classical guitar, and I still play that almost every day, I suppose. It's my original kind of guitar voice, and I've developed, I think, my own little sort of thing with it. So it's I mean, I've been playing this one guitar, this Takamine, for forever, basically, for many years, and it's I've always managed to sort of get. I found it easier to get like a rhythm sound out of a nylon string guitar than out of the normal sort of electric guitars that you'd use for it. I mean, I use electric as well a lot, and it's a combination of these things that sort of work for me. But I've found that that I can use a sort of like a flamenco funky style for putting rhythms down, and if I put all the middles and bottom end or a lot of it out of it, it makes a really sort of easy to use rhythm sound. And then the individual note melody sound is something that I've always found also very easy to sort of to really get sort of a lot of feeling and emotion into, and a very easy sound to record once you've been used to doing it for a long time. But I play a lot of electric guitar, as you know, and that's what I did in my career as a rock musician. And my main sort of voice is my SG Gibson, which SG Special 1962, I think, which is kind of, and that's this one, which any JoJo Zep fans would recognise. And another thing that I've had, well, it's 1962, and I bought it in 1968. and it's the only thing I have that I've had longer than my wife. So that sort of says a lot, because we've been together most of our lives, and loving it too. And so the SG I played all my gigs with in the Falcons, and it's you can see sort of from the back that it's sort of been around a bit, and it's had on the third set of frets. It's been refretted 3 times. It's got you can see the neck breaks off every now and then at the back there.
Yeah,
it's a weak spot on the SG, and that's been stuck back a few times. There's a great thing here where the lead plugs in, where in part of my stage act of jumping up and down in the Falcons once, Wilbur Wilde was next to me. I was next to Wilbur, and he was standing on my lead. And of course, when you jump up and Wilbur's standing on your lead, then something's got to give. Because Wilbur's a big chap, and that ripped that out there. So, but it's a very light and very malleable guitar. I bend the neck quite a bit to sort of add. You can hear that on that second track on the Flow album, where you can actually sort of you can actually get a. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's a sort of a tremolo by bending the neck, which is kind of quite weird, really. You can do that, which is kind of great fun. But I've been playing this for so long, forever, that it's just it's hard to describe how my kind of relationship with it. It's just an extension of myself. It's quite extraordinary. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have it. It'd be a terrible day. I've got some other guitars. I've got a Schecter Strat, which is for getting that Strat sound, which is a lovely guitar as well. I don't know if you know about Schecter. It's they made spare parts for Fender, or not for Fender. They made spare parts that would fit a Fender guitar. And unfortunately, they got sued by them in the end and went out of business. But they made so many parts that you could make a complete guitar out of them, which is what I've ended up with. And so I use that, and I do like the whammy bar on the Strat as well.
What amp have you generally played through?
Very good. Another good question. Well, I was going to say always Marshalls, but I've got a few stories there, but not. I did have high watt in England when I guess I've strayed from Marshall occasionally, but for all the everything on the albums I've made recently has been my 1980 J&P Marshall combo, 50 watt combo. Which is it's there. Fits in very nicely into my sort of setup here. Yeah. A Valve, of course, Marshall. The first Marshall I ever had was in Adelaide back in the 60s. I got in very early with Marshalls in Australia. I bought my first one from the Twilights when they broke up, and they bought them from the Who Small Faces tour, which was 67, I think. The Who Small Faces, I think Manfred Mann as well was on that bill, came out to Australia, and they brought out 200 watt Marshall heads and the double speakers, the bass, the bottom one, the square one, and then the top one with the slope top. And I bought one of those, although I ended up with 2 top speakers rather than the bottom ones. I can't remember the rhythm guitarist in the Twilights, which was a fantastic coup. I mean, I saw them when we went to live in London. I just wish I'd hung on to them, of course, which you always do that with vintage gear, with the old gear. You shouldn't ever sell anything, but you just have to, especially when you're young. And that would have been probably, now, would have been a very valuable collector's item, especially the fact that Pete Townsend would have probably smashed his guitar on the walnut as well, which would have been a great thing. So yeah, I use valve Marshalls. Typically, I don't use pedals. I grew up in an area where you would maybe have a wah-wah pedal and a fuzz box, but and like that's when I started playing. But I didn't follow the development into lots and lots of pedals. I just got my sounds by keeping the amplifier quite hot. Preamp, you always need a preamp for that sort of thing, so you can keep the volume under control. Mind you, in the old days, if you didn't have a preamp, you just put the amp up to 11 and bugger it, sort of thing. Yeah, just by sort of manipulating the settings on the guitar and the pickups and stuff, so you could you'd never get a really clean sound, but a clean enough sound, a cleaner sound for rhythms and things like that, and then whack everything up and for a lead sound, for a distorted lead sound.
If COVID ever goes away, do you think you'll get out and play some of this music?
That's a great question, and I would love to do that. Typically, I haven't done it much at all. Once or twice when I've released an album, I've played a release gig. I would love to do it, and if I have enough success, sort of with the publicity or with the acceptance or with this new album, getting a larger audience, which there is a captive audience now with everyone stuck online. The opportunity hopefully will arise. The hard bit for me is to be able to present the music or reproduce the music in anything like the shape and form I would like it to be. And I can certainly do it, but it would take all my talented friends that I know. I'm in a reasonable sized band, and quite a bit of work to do that. And now in the past, I have run my own groups, and it's a thankless task. It was great in the old days when I was a member of a successful group, and I just kind of like did everything that needed to be done, and got instructions from the tour manager on where to turn up and what to do, and did my bit in rehearsals and writing with Joe and Jeff Burstin and in the Falcons and that sort of thing. But to have to put together a band and play this music is quite a tough ask, but I would love to do it. So if I get the chance to do it, I certainly will.
Yeah.
That's what I can say, I reckon, on that one.
Yeah. And if people want to buy the album or have a listen to it, I imagine Bandcamp is the best place to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Bandcamp is certainly fine, and they're more than welcome to get it there. It's available everywhere, really. That's what it looks like. The CDs are available from Bandcamp as well as my website, so they can buy it directly from me on the website if they want to. It's everywhere. It's on all the streaming services. It's Spotify and iTunes and etc. So it's readily available.
Yeah. All right, Tony Faehse, it's been great to catch up, and all the best with the album.
Thank you very much, Greg. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.